let's look at California. Here's 2020 compared to 2024 as mapped by the New York Times. You see a reddening of the inland areas, places like San Bernardino County, Fresno. And interestingly, also, some of the ballot measures that passed are kind of go against expectations. I've highlighted a few of them. No on eliminating forcing inmates to work. No on raising the minimum wage. No on local government residential rent control. And yes on increased sentencing for certain drug and theft crimes. What do you think accounts for all this in beautiful California, Lee?
Well, the rent control one is put on there by the same interest group almost every other cycle. I think this is the second or third time it's failed. That's a little bit less surprising. Really none of this is terribly surprising. Maybe the minimum wage is the most surprising. Prop 36, I think, is the most interesting, though, because it really kind of seals the perfect 10-year cap here. 10 years ago in 2014, California voters, backed by George Soros, Sean Parker, many of the tech elite, the wife of the Netflix founder, they put on this ballot initiative, criminal justice reform, really overhauling the system here in California, making it so theft, property crimes below $950 were a misdemeanor, not a felony, decriminalizing possession of small drug amounts. And, at the time I supported this is around the time, a little after the time I moved to California, it seemed like a good idea, seemed like an important correction after over incarceration and criminalization. But people have seen
this was the same time that three strikes reform was on the ballot. There's a lot of which I voted for. There was a lot of criminal justice reform in the air.
That's exactly right, and this is really where it started picking up very quickly. But people have seen the experience, and it can't all be attributed to that 2014 ballot measure, but I think a significant portion can. That it's not just in San Francisco, but San Francisco is where you see the viral videos, the mass thefts, we see it particularly from luxury stores, but really it's local stores that are getting hit the hardest. You see the closure of grocery stores, of Target, of pharmacies, of mom and pop shops all over the state because of mass theft, people's cars being broken into constantly. It's kind of enough is enough attitude that I think Democrats have had, or just everyone's had in California. We've seen Democrats massively support this. I think even San Francisco voted to approve Prop 36, rolling back criminal justice reform. That really gives you a perspective of how far it moved. And just generally speaking, there's this kind of demand across the board for a fix. I mean, this was sponsored initially by retail companies like Walmart and Target, put some of the money for the signature gathering to qualify this for the ballot. Some Republicans initially supported it, but it was eventually supported by the Democratic mayors of San Jose and San Francisco and many other Democrats across the state. So this isn't necessarily a right-left thing. This is a coalition of folks saying, look, the state is broken. We have far too much crime, even though we don't have the same kind of violent crime rates as some states, as some cities. We have extraordinary levels of property crime that needs to end.
Would the criminal justice reform backlash have happened without the pandemic?
Yes.
Do you think so?
Absolutely. I think the pandemic exacerbated it because, these things are triggering for folks. So I'm going to be careful with the language I use. There's the broken windows theory that...
Are you doing a trigger warning on our show?
Yes, I'm doing a trigger
warning.
Yeah, just hit mute if you're not ready for this. But, I don't know exactly how I feel about this, but there's some... It just seems clear from my lived experience in California that once you have small amounts of property crime going completely unprosecuted, it snowballs into larger and larger, and you just kind of see it. No one pays for the bus anymore in San Francisco. You get on the bus, literally no one pays. People will walk down a street smashing every window. You don't see any cops. I've had friends visit me in San Francisco, and we're going to the pharmacy to grab some sunscreen before going to the park, and there are teenagers just stuffing their backpack and bags full of items. It's not just a Fox News exaggeration of the reality. It really is what people experience here. and the small crimes have led to larger crimes. So, it's something that even I've talked to people who are on the far left who have associated with Antifa in the past. I don't know if they still would, but who've said, look, we've got a problem. We need more police.
One of the unfortunate things about all this, besides all the people who've been victimized by it, is that what is the effect going to be on criminal justice reform? I assume that you are in agreement with me that there are aspects of what happened 10 years ago that were good, and it was all kind of bundled together with saying that you can shoplift with minimal penalty is not necessarily the same as, saying you don't have to rot in prison for the rest of your life, or saying that certain classes of drugs should be decriminalized is not the same as saying that you're allowed to do whatever on the sidewalk with no consequences whatsoever. Are you at all hopeful that the worst case scenario here is really that we get kind of like a backlash where we go back to like the 90s or something like that, which I don't think was working well. The other option is we kind of have a sensible reset on what makes sense as for criminal justice reform. How do you feel about the prospects for that kind of reset?
Well, I don't know about the political prospects. I think the backlash is still ongoing, and in any kind of atmosphere of backlash, you're going to have some extreme unintended consequences and some bad policy. That being said, I would like to see prisons improved. We need prisons that really rehabilitate people, that aren't areas where they're gang infested and violent and unhygienic and people are getting hurt. They need to be areas where violent criminals, people who have committed certain offenses, are taken away from society. They do pay a penalty, but they have opportunities to reform themselves, to learn work skills, to learn, to gain an education, to gain financial skills, so they're quickly reintegrated into society. I mean, we really have not solved the problem of our extremely high recidivism rate. America doesn't just have a very large prison population. We have an extremely high recidivism rate. And you want to talk about Bernie Sanders, he obsessively talks about the Nordic model. Well, some of the places that have the lowest recidivism rate in the world are countries like Norway that spend a lot on their prisons. Well, people talk about California prisons being expensive. I might be getting the numbers wrong. People can fact check me. I think I looked at them a long time ago. It's something like $70,000 or $80,000 for an inmate. It's more than a college tuition. People talk about how expensive it is in California. I would argue it's not enough. In Norway, it's something like $140,000, $150,000 per prisoner. That's a lot. But then
you again might be getting into that same problem that California Democrats run into, which is a big reason for that is the prison guards union is like one of the most powerful groups, or it was for many years one of the most powerful groups in the state. Yeah. And so that contributes in some ways to the ballooning costs, right?
No, and all of this is kind of this is both edges of democracy. We have one of the most open societies. People can experiment, they can start new businesses, they can protest, they can do whatever. But I guess the negative side of that is that any interest group can then shape policy for the broad public interest. And we have just random billionaires and prison guard unions creating our criminal justice policy rather than being these policies created for the broad public interest.
I was thinking about this a fair bit the other day because I was reflecting on the apparently wildly successful Donald Trump ad that was Kamala is for they, them, Donald Trump is for you. And it was basically playing on the transgender surgeries for inmates thing, which became something that I think both the left and the right got a little momentarily obsessed with for a second there. Which is actually wild because if you dig into Bureau of Prisons data, you'll find that I think in the last few years, there have been a grand total of 2 of those gender reassignment surgeries, which terrible use of taxpayer dollars from my perspective, but it's crazy how much time, of very highly paid, influential people, political analysts and consultants, so much time was sucked up by this one issue where I guess every single gender reassignment surgery for a felon matters, but for crying out loud, how unserious of our politics to be focused on that quality of life issue, when in reality, there are tons and tons of other quality of life issues for inmates all over the country. And yet we don't have a good enough politics to actually focus on those for more than, 3 seconds. I did want to take us to the San Francisco mayor, Daniel Lurie, who was just recently elected.
People and businesses are not coming back downtown until it's clean and safe. We need to act. We need to address public safety. We need a fully staffed police department and sheriff's department and 911 dispatch office. We're spending $700 million a year on our behavioral health system. We've skewed so heavily to harm reduction, which I believe is part of the continuum of care. It's very important. But we forgot about building the beds and treating people. I have a plan that we will put out 1,500 new shelter beds in the first 6 months of my administration. They will be safe. They will be dignified. People will no longer resort to, nor will they be allowed to sleep on our streets. We need to get tough on this because, as the former mayor said, there is nothing good about what is happening in these tents. Simply put, it can no longer be an option. We need more safe, dignified shelter. We need to double down on homeward bound. We need more mental health and drug treatment beds. We have to send a message to this country and to the world that you do not come to San Francisco to deal drugs, to do drugs, or to sleep on our streets.
We definitely want to try to get him on the show at some point. But Lee, you're a San Francisco resident. What do you think? Are you optimistic about Lurie's prospects for actually turning San Francisco around?
I think I speak for almost every San Franciscan where we say we don't know. He says, the heir of Levi Jeans fortune, spent a ton of money. He took popular stances on getting tough on crime and opening business back up. I think everyone wants that. But he's still kind of just like an open book. He hasn't really worked in the private sector or in politics. He ran a family foundation for his family, giving out money to different groups around the Bay Area. Some have argued that some of those grants didn't make sense. They went to housing nonprofits that seemed to make the problem worse or wasted money.
Are you claiming he's a Nepo baby? No real world experience?
Yeah, a jeans oligarch now runs the city. And look, I don't know, but I'm still, if he does a great job, good. I don't know. He's going to deal with a very divided board of supervisors. I think one or two of the races are still not called. We use, ranked choice in the city. And yeah, there are big structural problems with San Francisco. It's a weak mayor system. The board of supervisors has a lot of power. There's an attempt to get rid of all these commissions. There's constant creation of more and more commissions that then create their own bureaucracy that's then less accountable, that creates more rules, that makes it difficult to build and start new businesses. That ballot initiative failed. So look, he's going to have to deal with a lot of bureaucracy. So, we have, I think in most politics, we have this kind of great man of history theory that maybe applies to Donald Trump, but really no one else, that someone comes in and completely changes the zeitgeist and tears through the bureaucracy or the politics to reshape society. It's usually not true, that they need the grassroots groups, that they need the right political moment, that they need kind of the right coalition. There's been, over the last 2 or 3 years, this attempt to kind of create think tanks and media that are more on the center left of San Francisco, because typically most of the interest groups are relatively far left or tied to the city's very large public sector employee unions. Maybe that creates the political space for reform, but again, TBD.
There, while we're speaking about California politics, one figure who was sort of lurking around the edges of the entire 2024 presidential race was Gavin Newsom. There was real, put me in, coach energy. He was putting himself out there. What do you think about a Newsomian future for the Democratic Party?
I think California Democrats have dominated the National Democratic Party for a very long time. And I think one could argue that's part of the problem with the National Democratic Party, that's not reflective of the diversity of the country. There's too much San Francisco influence. Kamala Harris came from San Francisco, Nancy Pelosi, Gavin Newsom. They all kind of came up in politics in the same kind of political structure in the city. And Gavin Newsom is incredibly skilled as a politician. It's really hard to count him out. He's willing to pivot on a million different issues. But I don't know if he's right for this moment. He's really staked himself out on culture war issues that I think the electorate has now demonstrated are exceedingly unpopular outside of California. Whether that's on trans ideology, on he impaneled this reparations commission. He's really, I think, very skilled at floating big promises to the various interest groups that make up the Democratic Party. He campaigned on a promise to create a state version of single payer. Of course, once he gets elected, completely abandons that. He campaigned on a promise to strengthen public schools. He did move a little bit of money there, but public schools are still very broken in California. So instead of working on these core economic issues, he's been very focused, and he's got a long pattern of this, of elevating the kind of craziest in the Republican Party. He spends a lot of money in manipulating the Republican primary. So he's kind of chosen his opponents over the last two gubernatorial campaigns and then run against very weak opponents. So it's given him this persona of invincibility, but that's not something you can do on a national scale. It's not really transferable.
Hey, that was a clip from Just Asking Questions. You can watch another one here or the full episode here. And please subscribe to our brand new channel to get us started off right and be notified when new episodes or clips go up. Thanks for watching.